abroad. More encouraging was our finding that the local population was very supportive of our work. We are looking forward to continued work in the Konopin area and hope we will be able to carry out similar projects in other areas of Ukraine. Here in Canada, ATI hopes that human trafficking will become an integral part of the secondary school curriculum in Ontario high schools. I've listed a few steps that have been taken against human trafficking, but the grim reality is that the world is doing very little to stop the traffic. Within each country, there is weak interagency coordination and pathetically low funding. When asked, many government and police officials have responded that it is just not a priority. The Future Group's 2006 study, titled "Falling Short of the Mark," gave Canada a failing grade for our shameful treatment of trafficking victims. At the time, we did not even allow temporary visas for victims. We would simply deport them. Some improvements have been made, but better treatment is needed, especially since we need these victims to testify against their traffickers. Perhaps most importantly, traffickers need to be dealt with by heavy prison time and confiscation of all profits amassed by the abuse of their victims. Criminals need to know that buying and selling of humans is not a simple misdemeanor. It will not be tolerated. Countries have passed laws with stiff sentences for traffickers, but the key is enforcement, and we are not doing this effectively. 3 months in jail or community service are hardly effective deterrents. It is difficult to build a human trafficking case. It involves a long chain of actors, and of course we want to pin the ones that are at the top in order to fully break the network. Traffickers are also very clever when it comes to finding loopholes in the system. However, one person charged in Canada since we signed the protocol in 2000, this is unacceptable. And might I add, the sentence was never made, the charges were dropped. And as usual, they're given a lesser sentence, such as operating a brothel or child abuse in the case of child trafficking victims. The basic principle that should govern us all is that traffickers are criminals. Sorry. Victims must be treated as victims and not be confused as the perpetrators. Individuals who create the demand for trafficking must be held responsible and accountable. There should be a national helpline for trafficking victims, as they are unlikely to call 911. These hotline numbers exist all around the world, and it is unbelievable that Canada still does not have one. The government must call on NATO and the UN to make the struggle against trafficking an explicit part of every peacekeeping force. Military personnel overseas must be educated about trafficking. NATO's involvement in the Kosovo War has been identified as the main cause of the growth of the sex trade in the area, and I'm sure you can guess why. Peacekeeping forces should be in place to combat and not contribute to human trafficking. The debate on prostitution inevitably surfaces when we try to figure out what are the best ways to prevent trafficking. And while I've focused most of my research on this in the past year, it is a very heated debate that we don't have time to get into today. What I will say is I will jump to my conclusion on that the main reason why it doesn't work is that the demand for prostitution surpasses the supply of women who willingly enter the sex industry. So essentially, what legalization does is gives pimps and brothel owners government approval to conduct mass rape. We've seen this in every country that has adopted this approach. Australia has reported more than a 2-fold increase in sex trade since it introduced legalization. The Netherlands police themselves have reported that although licenses are issued to brothel owners, the law enforcement infrastructure just isn't there to monitor, follow up, or enforce regulations. And women in these legal brothels are 70 to 80% foreign. So if a country wants to make this a legal profession, why are its citizens not lining up for the jobs? And how do they justify the surge of women from economically desperate situations working in the sex industry? The darker side of the red light district has finally caught up, and major changes are being implemented. The government of Netherlands has reduced the display windows by 1/3 in an effort to gradually diminish Amsterdam's long-time most popular tourist attraction. In Canada, we are dealing with the opposite trend. With the 2010 Winter Olympics coming up in Vancouver, pro-sex workers are working harder than ever to decriminalize the industry. The criminal code in Canada does not prohibit prostitution, it just criminalizes certain acts related to it, for example, living off the avails of prostitution. Legal challenges are being brought forward, arguing that current prostitution law runs counter to other rights entitled to Canadian citizens. And actually, much of what they are saying is true. For example, it is illegal to discuss commercial sex transactions. This means that women have to jump into cars with clients without being able to assess the risk factor. The murder rate of prostituted women is soaring, and much of this could be prevented by changing our current laws. But that doesn't mean that the solution is to decriminalize the sex industry. Again, please get in touch with me if you want to discuss this issue further. So what can you yourselves do to change the situation? First off, get informed. There is so much information available online. And please discuss this issue with your friends and community members. Write a paper that touches on the issue so that you can gain a deeper understanding of it. Offer to assist in shelters where women have been trafficked. Keep your eyes and ears open for victims that you may encounter or hear about. Again, you might not think that this is possible, but like I said with the girl who was abroad in Moldova teaching English, she would not have guessed that this would have happened to her students if she didn't know about the issue. And because she knew, she looked deeper into it, and she found out what happened to them. And if you're wondering what happened with those children, she did not back down very easily. She caused quite a commotion in the community. She got on the TV, she got on the radio. Eventually, the traffickers called her, told her to stop, obviously, told her not to bother, that they weren't going to let the children go. She continued, and after 6 months, the traffickers called her and told her she could come and pick up the boy. We're not asking for you to do this, but by getting involved and active in this issue, you will soon discover where you can be most effective. The most motivating line that I've heard in this movement is that we need our will to end trafficking to surpass the will of the traffickers to keep it going. And at this point, we're not there. We are losing the battle. It might seem overwhelming that there are so many people and the scale is so great, but that is precisely why we need to work even harder. Since I began speaking, I guess 20 minutes ago, in Europe alone, over 20 women have been trafficked. Their lives changed forever. We must stop the traffic now. Thank you.